Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I hope you're well this morning. We are still in Romans 9 to 11 in this wonderful passage where Paul talks about his heartache and his longing for his own people, for the Jewish people. And he himself, of course, had been a devout Jew all his life. And he says at the beginning of chapter 10, "Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for them, for the Jews, is that they may be saved. I bear them witness that they have a zeal for God, but it is not enlightened. For being ignorant of the righteousness that comes from God and seeking to establish their own, they did not submit to God's righteousness. For Christ is the end of the law, that everyone who has faith may be justified." When Jesus came, he brought in the new covenant which was not about obeying the law. It was about faith, it was about trusting in God. It was about you can't earn salvation. But the Jewish mindset was that they were God's people. They believed absolutely that if you were born a Jew and you obeyed the law and you kept the rules and regulations and you did your religious observance faithfully, that you were one of God's people and no one could ever say you weren't. And for many of them, it was simple obedience. And when Jesus came and he challenged them to see that blind obedience of the law was not what God wanted. Some of them understood. Do you remember that teacher who came to him and said, "What must I do to inherit the eternal life?" And he said, "Well, what does it say in the Old Testament? What does the law say?" And he says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and soul and strength, and your neighbour as yourself." And Jesus said, "That's right. You've got the right message. It's not about the detail of the law. It's about the motive. It's about the love." And he questioned him still and said, "Yeah, but who is my neighbour?" Because he wanted to justify himself. He wanted to know that he had got it right, that what he did showed that he understood the law. But Jesus came and challenged the way they thought about observing the Sabbath, the way they thought about all the tithing, the way they lived their lives. He came to change their rules and regulations to faith. And hidden in the Old Testament throughout, there is this encouragement to be people of faith. The examples of all the great patriarchs are all about faith, about hearing God speak and doing what he says. And they got the law, yes, and they became God's people and God was leading them, but they kept getting it wrong and they kept disobeying the law, they kept wandering off. And these prophets that were sent, they had a message. They didn't say to the people, the way to stay right with God is to keep the law. No. What did Micah say? Micah 6:8. "God has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God." Micah didn't say, "What does God require of you?" Making sure you keep all the laws, making sure you make all the right sacrifices, making sure that you do, you tithe everything, making sure that you keep the rules, making sure that you don't mix with Gentiles. Didn't say any of those things. He said, "What does the Lord require of you? To do justice, to love kindness, to walk humbly with your God." You look at the prophets. They're all talking about how useless the sacrifices are if you cheat people in the marketplace, if you rob people to get your own way and to feather your own nest. What is that all about? I'm sorry, I'm going to have to open the door to let my cat into the other room because he's... All right, dear. In you go. Go on. This doesn't happen to the media people, does it? Having a cat that wants to get through the door. Right, so Micah. So Paul knew himself how hard it was to realise that if you were doing all that religious stuff, obeying all the rules, living your life according to all the rules and regulations, tithing, offering the sacrifices, celebrating the feasts regularly, going to Jerusalem on pilgrimage, all these things, to suddenly be confronted with someone who says, actually, it's your motive that God's looking at. It's not what you do. You can't earn it. It's by grace. It's by being people of faith. He found it very difficult to give up the old ways. He found it very difficult to stop persecuting the Christians who were challenging his faith. And his longing was for his own people. He knew how hard it was for them to change. And we have this, we don't have the same situation. Well, we do if we meet with Jewish people. It is difficult to converse with them because they don't mix very much with non-Jews, especially the devout Jews. But we have our own religious sect, our own religious sector. We have those who have gone to church all their lives, those who believe that the way to get right with God is to attend church regularly, it's to take communion regularly, it's to keep Lent, it's to observe the feasts and the festivals. It's to be kind to your neighbours, it's to do good deeds. And there are many people who have followed those kind of rules and regulations all their lives. And you ask them, are you a Christian? And they say, yes, I would never do any harm to anybody. And to persuade someone who is basically one of the good guys in our world that goodness is that you cannot earn God's righteousness by the things that you do. You cannot, however good you are, however brownie points you score, you cannot be saved by what you do. We cannot earn it. It is by grace alone. For if Christ is the end of the law, that everyone who has faith may be justified. It's the really religious observing people are the hardest to persuade that all that they've ever believed in and all they've ever done is not worth anything. Paul came to that point when he said, every qualification as a devout Jew that I have is nothing. It's like rubbish. It's like the contents of the sewer. It's not going to earn me anything. It's not worth anything compared to the grace of Jesus, the love of Jesus. And it is through faith that we are saved. It's very difficult to change that viewpoint. Very difficult. But it's here in Romans, and it was through Romans, that Martin Luther came to realise that all the teaching he'd had in his very religious life was not going to get him into heaven. That having masses said and paying for the priest to do things was not going to get anybody any closer to heaven. That it was all a gift, and that it had to be received as a gift and responded to with good actions and with a life of dedication, but that life of dedication would never earn the place that was a gift. It's very hard for religious people to change their mind. But Paul is a wonderful example that it is possible, that we shouldn't stop trying, that we should seek to enlighten those who are simply ignorant of the real message of the gospel. That's a great thought for the day, and I'll leave you with it, then see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.